So welcome to part 3 of this shirt making instructional videos. We're now on to the step for doing the collar and the collar stand. If you're following the pattern in the book, this is steps 12 through to 19 on page 34. So I've already marked up the collar pieces. You've got 2, and the collar stand pieces with tailor's chalk just to mark the spots from the pattern. And we're going to start by ironing on some interfacing to one side of the collar. Okay, so we've ironed on the interfacing to one side of the collar. Let's leave those bits out of the way for the moment. So we've got the 2 collar pieces, one with the interfacing on and one without. So we are now going to attach these 2 together, right sides together. And we're going to sew our 1.5 centimetre seam allowance around 3 of the sides. So the only bit we're not going to touch is the bit that actually goes and is attached to the collar up stand. Again, we have our notches and our tailor's chalk marks just to help us line up the pieces. So I normally just put in 2 or 3 pins just to hold it in place to go through the sewing machine. So they're lined up there, corner. And as is the case with most of this pattern, it's a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. So I'm going to just do the sewing round and I'll come back. Okay, so we've sewn those pieces together. What I now need to do is cut down these seams and then turn it the right side out. And just up here at this point where you're going to have the point, you want to cut it off at an angle. It'll help it easier when you turn it through to get a neater finish. So there we go. So now what we'll do, shut the way, is we're going to turn it right side out, and we're going to go and iron that. Okay, so we've ironed that now, and what we'll need to do now is do a top stitch just around the edge where we've already stitched it. So we won't be doing top stitching here. This is the part that will attach, as I said before, to the collar stand. So it's going to go around these 3 sides with some top stitching. Okay, so now we've top stitched it, and as you can see, hopefully there, yep, you can see the top stitching all the way around, and that's also the other side. Okay, so we can put that aside just for one moment whilst we now concentrate on the collar stand. So as you're aware, I'm doing the shirt in 2 different fabrics. So the collar is in the navy blue and the collar stand will be in the white. So as we did with the collar itself, we have to apply interfacing to one side of the collar stand. So I'm just going to go and iron that on. Okay, so we've ironed on the interfacing to one side. It's not very clear because it's white on white. We've got the interfacing on. Now we need to turn over 1.5 centimetres seam allowance on the piece where you've applied the interfacing to, and then trim down that seam. Okay, so we've ironed over the 1.5 centimetre. So we're now just going to cut this down to, I think the pattern says 1/4 inch. But I will just, yes, so you just want to trim it down, and I always do this by eye. Okay, so that's that trimmed down. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is attach this to the collar stand, and we're going to do that just tacked on to start with, because what we're going to do is we're going to add both sides on before we put it through the sewing machine. So the side with the interfacing to the side with the interfacing. So again, you have your notches and you have your dots. So we're going to pin this together first. So that's that now pinned on, and we are going to just do a tacking line just to hold that all in place. Okay, so that's the tacking stitches in place. We can now remove all of these pins, and we then need to place the other side of the collar stand on the other side of the collar, because once we've sewn it all, that raw edge there will be contained within the collar. So we just need to line this all up, and then we're going to pin it in place. Okay, so now that's all pinned. Again, what we're going to do now is we are going to, let's put one in there. We're going to sew 1.5 centimetre seam allowance all the way around. So from the curved side all the way around here to the other side. Okay. Okay, so we've now attached the collar stand to the collar. There's the stitching there on both sides. Okay, so what we now need to do is trim down this seam again, and because it's a curved seam, we'll want to put in some notches just to help it lay flat when we turn it the right way round. So we will and as I say, just on the curves, we just want to cut out some bits. I don't know whether you can see that. There we go. It'll just make it easy to turn it round, turn it through, and help everything to lay flat when we turn it through. Obviously you don't want to cut through the stitch line. So when if you've got any tacking stitches left in because you've tacked within a bit too close to the sewing line, then just make sure you pull out those pieces. Okay, so when we turn this the right way around, there you see you have your collar and your collar stand. So the first thing we're going to do now is actually iron that to tidy it up before we go to the next step, which is to attach it to the shirt. One thing you might want to check just before you start attaching it to the shirt is obviously you want your collar to be even. So the first thing I always check is to make sure that from the collar stand to the tip of the collar there, it's this line here is the same length. And as you can see, that is. Okay, so it should hopefully then, once it's attached to the shirt, gives you a nice even collar. Okay, so we're now ready to attach the collar and the collar stand to the shirt. Now this is one of the bits I always, I think when I first started making shirts I found it a little bit sort of awkward, because obviously you're starting with a curve and attaching what is effectively a straight line. So take your time to attach it all together. Once you've sewn it on one side, you'll actually snip the collar and put in some notches to make it a bit easier for it to sort of lie flat for when you do the top stitching. So we start by attaching the collar, the side of the collar stand which we didn't turn over and iron, so the one where we still got the notches showing. We're going to attach that to the inside of the shirt, because when you turn it out, that's when you're going to top stitch, and you've got this folded neat edge that you're going to top stitch on the outside of the shirt. So we're going to start by pinning this on the inside. So again, you have notches and dots. So we're going to start in the center just by getting these bits attached. And then again, you've got some notches on the edge, and again they will line up with the notches on the collar stand. And again on this side as well. Then we'll pin along. So as I say, start with the notches and the marks, and then you pin in between. Again, I think it's best to put in too many rather than too few pins, and just take your time to make sure everything is lined up how you want it to be. Personally, I find if you take the time to add in plenty of pins and pin things accurately, then it makes the actual sewing process a little more straightforward. Okay, so that's it all pinned, and you can see on the other side the back. Now when you put this through the sewing machine, again this is a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. You want to take your time, you want to be very careful that because you're attaching a straight edge to a curved edge, just make sure that you've not got any tucks in the back. If you take it slowly, you should be fine. And if you find you've got any tucks once you've attached it on, just unpick a few stitches, even it out, and then sew it on again. But I'm going to get this sewn on now, and then I'll come back and show you the next step. Okay, so we now have the collar stand, one side of the collar stand attached to the wrong side of the shirt, as you can see there. What we've now got to do, turn it over, is we need to attach the other side of the collar stand to the outside of the shirt, and we're going to do that by top stitching. The first thing we need to do though is cut down this seam inside, and we're going to snip into the curves to make it easier so it lies flatter for when we attach the other side. So the first thing to do now, being very, very careful because you've got a straight edge and a curved edge, make sure you don't catch any of the collar or the collar stand when you're cutting down the seam. Okay, so that is snipped into the seam. So this is what we'll end up with. Now you might want to do a tacking stitch to hold everything in place. I'm going to pin this and then do the top stitching. So I'm going to pin it first and then I'll come back. Okay, so I've pinned that all in place. I now need to do the top stitching to secure it all in place, and the top stitching will go all the way around. So it's going to go along the edge close to the collar and then all the way around and doing the edge close to the top of the shirt, and that will then finish off that part of the collar. So I'll just do the sewing and then I'll come back. Okay, so we've done the top stitching, so now we have the shirt, the collar attached on the inside and the collar attached on the outside, and that will fold like so. So that's what it would look like on the inside, and that's what it would look like. Not very easy to show actually at the moment, and that's what it would show like on the outside. Just so I'll give you a better look at the collar. So as you can see, that's the collar. On the outside, and if I just lift that up, that is the collar on the inside.